Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Unity FM 93.5. I am Shalina Litt. Welcome back to the show if you're a regular listener. Today, as always, we're going to discuss the challenging topic of raising children. And with me, I have my special guest, King Cypher, Jules?
Yeah, Cypher.
Okay, just Cypher.
Cypher will do. Cypher's fine.
Okay, now we go way back, don't we?
Yeah, many years.
Yeah, and I was so proud to see what I seen on Facebook the other day, and that was a copy of a book written by you.
Thank you.
Well done, mashallah. It's really good to see that, you know when you see people grow and go on to do things. So it was great to see your name on there.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to talk briefly about the book, but before we do that, Cypher. Now I know that there's a lot of history behind the name, and I think I was around as the name kind of evolved. But where does that name come from? And
well, I mean, originally it's a name that stuck. At the time, I was in my teens. I was a very I started reading. I was very interested in Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. I was very interested in anything scientific, anything to do with Islam, anything to do with Sufism. Yeah. So and that's really from those studies. That's where the name came from, really.
Yeah.
So Cypher is like a place or a thing. It's to do with what's around you and what's in you and what governs you. So for me, it was kind of like once originally I started calling my record label Cypher, and the name just stuck. Mm-hmm. The name just stuck, and people started identifying it as somebody being knowledgeable about certain things, which I didn't think I was at the time, but I suppose I was, because I had that thirst for learning. Mm-hmm. That's it's always been there. So if you look at that history, you got people who were studying different sciences and philosophies, and you got the ideology of mathematics and the way in which numbers
work in this universe.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a few writers who have talked about it, like numbers revolving, like the way numbers work in the Bible, the way numbers work in the Quran. So that was definitely something of my interest at the time. So
yeah, I guess Cypher, if you understand what it means, for people that do read a lot, it kind of sets the mould of where you're at in terms of somebody who does seek knowledge. So, okay, so if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, because obviously I've seen you go from teens, and flourish. I don't know what's been going on in the little bit of the gap, but I've now seen a beautiful outcome.
Thank you.
So, what have you been up to? How did it all start? Tell us, who was Cypher, etc.
I suppose I was, my introduction to music was, I was a big fan of hip hop music. I was a big fan of reggae music, but definitely a massive fan of hip hop music. And because I just happened to be growing up when hip hop music was taking off, and then around about when I was about 12, I started DJing on the radio and stuff. I started DJing in clubs when I was about 14, 15. And, I'm blessed really because I was growing up in an era where the rappers that were around were like Rakim, Public Enemy, Gangstar. So without me even realizing it, I was being educated through the music. I didn't even realize I was being educated through the music, but I was being educated through the music.
Absolutely.
When I was about, so music, the rappers made me start questioning things and wanting to find out more. So, I started reading when I was started buying books and going to the library and started, reading about 15, 16 years old. I started getting into like Malcolm X and reading as anything I could. Let me try and, I think the first time I saw the Quran, I was about 17 years old.
Okay, mashallah.
And I started anything that was kind of stretching me. I just wanted to learn.
So it's important that you recognise that music was actually influencing you at such a young stage.
Definitely. I wouldn't be here without hip hop music. I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing now without hip hop music, because the music was educating me, and the music was also giving me something to do. In the vulnerable years there where, I could have gone in any direction, the music gave me a focus, like, well, I'm writing my lyrics. And I was a bit ambitious, I had I started a little part-time job. I think I worked about 3 or 4 weeks. One summer I saved up some money, and I went and started, pressing records, and that's really how my whole journey of sort of business started, really. I started learning through doing it from really, really, really small. And I'd try and do, I was, once I got the bug of wanting to release records, I was trying to do it all the time. So now my life is focused. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think once we start doing things, we're not so afraid of doing them, because fear is always going to be there. It will always exist, but you just got to keep moving and know it's there. You know what I mean? And just get on with what you're doing. And then whatever it is you fear becomes a little bit more accessible and not so scary, because you started to figure it out. Okay, that's lurking in the corner. I ain't going there again, But you just move forward. And not only did you move forward with that, like you said, pressing those records at an early age, your music was successful at the time.
I was doing, and it gave me focus, because like I said, a lot of my friends were going in all different directions. It was the era of, when things were going a little bit pear-shaped. So, but that sort, the music gave me something to do, to be occupied. Do you know what I mean? I was occupying my time, because one of the worst things you can be when you're young is not have something to occupy your time.
Yeah.
Because what happens is negativity then starts to occupy your time. But I was focused on the music, so that, I'd say between the ages of 16 to 20, I said 26, I was just reading constantly in the studio, writing, making beats, listening to hip hop. That was my life, really.
And the thing is, I don't think we realise, I guess now as an adult, I've reflected and looked at my ability, from Allah. Alhamdulillah, Allah's given me that ability to use words and connect with people, but at the time, like you says, you're young, you're angry about something, and we get a microphone and it just sounds brilliant, and other people are like, yeah, I relate to what they're saying, and that's, I guess how we end up on this platform, where we realise, well, actually, not only are we getting to get self-gratification by expressing something, but we're also having to help people, because we're expressing something that other people are going through, and I think at an early stage where you are surrounded by gangs and drugs, and your choices are very negative as a young person, if you don't have mommy and daddy protecting you and grabbing hold of you, well, the music did a good job of doing that, I think, in our early years. I'm not exposing myself, but obviously we know that I was previously in the music business. That's how we know each other, and that's how I can relate to being an artist and going out there and doing stuff. So, I think it's really important, because, as I said, the show is about raising children, and what I want to do is empower parents into understanding how vulnerable a young person can be. If we don't get to know our children and put the right things around them, then it's, unfortunately, we're not going to realise who they become in their teens.
Definitely. I would say, to all parents, really, one of the key things is you need to be able to relate to what your children are going through. What are they listening to?
Absolutely.
Who are they influenced by? Do you get what I'm saying? What is their thought process? And the thing is, if it's a fine balance, because if you're too I would say
laid back.
If you're too laid back, they're going to be into everything.
Yeah.
If you're too high and mighty, then they basically won't tell you what they're into, and you won't know what they're into. So it's a fine balance of kind of knowing what they're into, and but at the same time sort of like removing yourself, because you can't be their best friend. Do you know what I mean? But they need to be able to relate to you, but they also need to be able to respect you. So I think at the time for me, like I said, because I came from a working class family. Do you know what I mean? I grew up in a tower block, so for me, it wasn't like. But I did grow up with values. So it's not that but most of the people that I know now, a lot of my brothers, a lot of my friends, good friends who I grew up with, they also came up in families just like mine. But the reality of it is, you put somebody in a negative environment, in a negative situation, and they will react. I just give thanks. Like when I was in my very, very early years, I had sports, and then in my teens I had music, and the music kept me focused. And it just happened to be that the music that I was listening to at that time sounded harsh, and it sounded hard, but it was, I was really being educated. In the 90s, hip hop was so, I'd say the 80s and 90s, hip hop was so powerful in terms of, the educating value of it. I can honestly say, I was speaking to one of my good friends the other day, and he's involved in youth development, youth work, and he was like, well, Public Enemy and Rakim and those guys, what they did for him. So I suppose that's why I wrote the book. I think that's always originally the original hip hop, the original philosophy about it. It was about engaging the youth in something positive, and the elders in the hip hop movement tried to do something positive with it. And I suppose maybe a little bit of that's been lost with the money coming into it.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, the music industry, yes, it did have its positives, and there was always the negative end, the rock music and whatever. And if we look at music today, I only know about these people like Nicki Minaj and whatever, because wherever you go, you're surrounded by them. But when we look at Nicki Minaj, the Barbie doll, and we look at the content of what she's saying, your children are being groomed, and they're being groomed right under your noses, And I see the likes of Hannah Montana, Britney Spears, they start out all innocent. Rihanna, good girl gone bad. Hello, do we have to spell it out for you? Your children are falling in love with these artists, and then when them artists go crazy and decide to go wild, you get caught up in it, And so yes, unfortunately, this is what's happened.
Well, yeah, it's grown from a community-based, art form in the ghettos of New York to a global industry. There's a lot of people who make money from hip hop music who don't actually like the music or like the people who listen to the music. So, it's a shame, but for me, I want to be able to give back and do something positive for the youth coming up. When I was growing up, I faced a lot of challenges, and going for jobs, trying to find work, I faced a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And I know even in this time, for a lot of young people, they're facing the same challenge. Their face might not fit, their name might not fit, and they might feel within themselves, they don't have the self-confidence or the discipline to be able to make the best of what they could be. But what I'm trying to do with the book is basically say to young people, look, there is another option, and that option is, why don't you start your own business? Why don't you learn how to manage your money properly, so you're not spending all your money on things that you don't really need, but you and even if you do, you understand what you're doing. If you're on your face, how to make a plan, how to get to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, how to kind of build life plans and stuff, and I'm just trying to do my part and share that information. I've been through good times, and I've been through tribulation, and I'm trying to share my methods that I use to get out of the difficult times, and also some of the wisdom that I've learned from people who've been successful. I'm trying to share that with people, young people like me, you know, who live in the inner city. It could be Birmingham, could be London, could be Nottingham, could be Bristol, could be Liverpool, but they sort of, you know, they're at a stage, where am I gonna go? There's people in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s who I think will also get a lot out of the book. Like, where am I gonna go? How am I gonna take things to the next stage? How, you know, I've tried to explain a lot of complicated things, or things that seem complicated at first, like buying houses, or, you know, what happens when you put your money into the bank and stuff like that. I've tried to explain it in a very, very, very simple way. And that's why I called it the Secret Money Manual, because simply, you know, a lot of this information for people from the working class is kind of secret. It's something that you know, wealthy people share with each other, and I'm trying to share this information with the youth and with other people who live in the urban environment who might be struggling and want to improve their situation.
And it's such a broad desire that we all have. I mean, I'm sorry if anyone's sitting at home thinking, I'm not that bothered about money. You're lying. Don't lie to yourself. We all want to be comfortable, you know, and that this is something that, you know, drives us forward. Obviously, I think it's really admirable what you're doing, because on the one hand, you're continuing to climb, you know, and my experience of trying to get to the top is, as much as I want to help those around me, I can only put what they need to help themselves. And if you can't help yourself, then I got to keep moving. And, you know, if you need me, then call me, and the help is there. Like I said, I left it for you. And I think it's really great because you've kept moving, and you've also, you know, recorded that process and offered it, you know, to people in a book, which is great.
Thank you.
You know, because people will look up to you and say, well, how did you do it? You know, and in order for us to get to that point where we can say, well, I did it like this, we have to help ourselves, you know. So I had a look at the book. I hope this is this is my copy, yeah.
You've got like one of.
Do I have to pay for it? So I had a brief look at the beginning of it, and I know that we had some good old chats back in the day about, you know, mathematics, etc.
Yeah.
And I can see immediately at the beginning you've got formulas of success. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that the way forward? You know, have you found that?
I suppose. I mean, one of the things is maths was always one of my favorite subjects. When I was at school, my favorite subjects were history, English literature, and maths.
Okay.
And maths is always something where, when I was at college, you know, I could honestly say I tried hard, but I didn't really have to try as hard in maths. You know, it's something that came natural to me, probably because, you know, my father liked maths. You know, he used to leave maths books around, and he used to, you know, when we were kids, those kind of things were around. So, you know, when I saw like things like algebra and things like that, I never really bugged out about it because I'd seen it before. Do you get what I'm saying? Even if it hadn't been fully explained, I've seen it before. So I think in that way. You know, I do see things in a very mathematical way, like 1 + 1 = 2, and anything outside that, you know. So I don't understand when people make decisions or do things which are not logical. Do you know what I mean? Especially if the information is supplied to them. So for me, that's just the way I think. You know, like for example, I said poverty minus vision equals suffering.
Right.
And the reason I said that is because you can be poor. You know, I know what it's like to be in a flat with no electric, you know, and cold in the winter. But if you've got vision, you know, so you've got something to believe in, or you've got something that gives you guidance and gives you direction, then you know that that's a temporary situation, and you know that you're going to elevate beyond that position. So, you know, depression will not overtake your life. You get what I'm saying? So even though you're going through a tough time, you will realize, or you can see that has been a temporary situation. But if you take away that vision, then you will be suffering. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you now it's like it can overwhelm you. The feeling of poverty can overwhelm you, and I know what that feels like. Then now for me, that's something through experience, from my own experience. I see, I've seen it in that way, in that very mathematical way.
Yeah, I think when we look at our generation, because you do mention, don't you, the hip hop generation, and I think I was part of that.
Of course.
Yeah. So when we look at a lot of the people that was around us, I do know a lot of them made bad choices, probably ended up in prison, etc. But yeah, there is quite a handful of us. Because I had Osama Ray Douglas in on the show, and I know he was part of Brick House back in the day, and it's a beautiful thing that we've been able to look at our own experiences as youth and translate them and deliver them to the youth now, to empower the youth to grow, because I think initially what you're saying about the vision is that if we as parents don't give our children something to visualize on or something to achieve, we don't set them expectations, they've got nothing to reach for, and they will only reach for what is being put around them. So for example, children or young people that end up drug dealing or getting into gangs or whatever, it seems easy, and they see an easy route to making money or whatever, so they go for it. Whereas, like I said to you earlier about fear, is that if we know that the fear is there but we keep moving, then we become familiar with what it is. Sometimes we can eradicate a fear and grow through them, and I think that's the great thing that you've done. So we're coming to the end of the show. Could you briefly, I know we can chat forever, and I can chat forever, that's why I'm a radio presenter, but could you briefly then go over the chapters? I mean, how have you...
Okay, so like you got the introduction,
which is a great one. Immediately I like the Damon Dash quote.
Thank you.
Is that you got to, I can't remember it now, but you got to work at it basically to change your circumstances.
Thank you. And then the first chapter talks about the basic principles of gaining wealth. So, and I'll just talk about, things that seem basic to us, but things like, if you're earning, I don't know, if you make £25,000 in a year, do you know what I mean? But your expenditure and the things you spend your money on is £35,000 in a year, then you know that, this is not working out.
Yeah.
So, and the reality of it is that might seem very, very basic, but when you live in this inner city, I see that every day. Do you get what I'm saying? Then the next chapter deals with personal development, and it deals with how to improve yourself and the kind of things that you need to do to get yourself on the next level. Okay. It's called the 20 basic rules for developing wealth.
And I think that's really good that you break it down as well, because for young people, and I think for any individual in themselves, we need to have these bite-sized, achievable steps. Sometimes people want really big dreams, and it's like, well, okay, what's the first basic step you need to take to achieving it,
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that, I can, like I said, I'm blessed. Like, I'm not trying to... one of the things, I'm not trying to make people think that I'm this super wealthy, super rich guy, because I'm not. But I've been blessed. I've been in the music industry for 25 years. So I've been around also a lot of wealthy people in different capacities. I've done different jobs all through my life. And I've been around wealthy people. I got friends of mine who run banks. I got friends who are accountants and stuff. And I'm like a sponge. I just soak up that knowledge.
Now, I don't know how we've slipped, but it was Morris Delta, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That you got big. And I mean, you got to the point where you was rolling with people in the States, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you going to give us a few of them names? Because I can't remember at the time.
We toured with Wu-Tang. We toured with, we did shows with Mobb Deep. We did shows with Redman. We did shows with, a lot of the big artists at the time.
And the funny thing is my reality of meeting them kind of people was... they're just real people. They got same experiences. They got drama going on, and they're just put in a position where they get to put the mic and make a bit of dough. But ultimately, I think we have to understand that, like you says, they didn't have that vision, or they didn't know their purpose in life. So you can see when it comes to drugs, and they were going through some drama.
Definitely. The thing about it, the music industry is as well, I met people who come from, You know, I met people who they don't listen to hip hop, but they're involved in the music industry in a very, very high position.
Right.
So I know people who own clubs, chains of clubs, people who involved in accounting, banking. You know, through music, I've met people from all different spheres of life. And one of the things in the book is I'm just basically the information and the wisdom that I've gathered from meeting these people through my own good and bad experiences. I've put that in there in terms of what I've seen people do and what I've seen work. You know, I'm blessed. I feel very blessed. I've met ambassadors, sat down with ambassadors of countries. I've sat down with, you know, gone to football matches with people who work in banks, own banks, you know, and I feel blessed for that, you know, and that's really through music. You know, because music breaks down barriers where, you know, people who would not normally speak to you will speak to you because they're interested in what you do. And
we're just coming to the end of the first part of the show, but if you're okay to stay, I'd really like to continue this, so we can talk about this after the break. Yeah,
love to.
Okay, excellent. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. You're listening to Unity FM 93.5. So you were saying that when you met all these different people, because I don't want to lose the flow of what we were saying, I think it's really important, you know, is you were saying that when you met these different people from all these different areas running banks, etc., what you was going to come to a conclusion, wasn't you?
Oh, yeah. So basically, when I met all these different people I've learnt something and they've learnt something from me. You know, traveling is one of the best methods of education. You learn stuff that you really would never learn if you hadn't traveled.
Yeah.
You know, for example, like I've been doing some youth work. I've been going around Europe, traveling around, meeting youth groups and stuff like that, meeting, you know, politicians, meeting people who, you know, decision makers, and just to see their thought process and the way their systems and the way they do things in a different country. You know, sometimes you just have to watch them and you just have to see what's happening to learn. And so for me, I feel, like I said, I feel blessed. I've gathered a lot of knowledge and and wisdom through experience and seeing things and meeting people. And I just wanted to share that because, you know, for me, if you're not sharing it and you're just keeping it to yourself, it doesn't make any sense. You know, the reality of it is, you know, it's part of the process for me that I want to share that information so that other people in my situation and younger and even older can take that information to help get themselves out of a problem or to further and develop, you know, their position in life. And the reality of it is, you know, no man is an island. You know, we cannot prosper ourselves, and in this era of austerity, you know, if we've got a method in which we can make our communities more stable and more productive, we should share that information. Now, a lot of people have this information and they share it with their family members and their close friends, but I'm just trying to share it with the masses in terms of working class people who live in urban communities, the urban survivors, regardless to whatever religion or race they are, so that they can improve themselves and improve their condition.
So 20 steps on chapter 2, which was personal development.
20 steps.
Chapter 3?
Chapter 3 talks about practical investment strategies. So I talk about ISAs. I talk about, you know, I also go a bit deeper. I start talking about, you know, hedge funds and, you know, the different funds that people have, like pension funds and stuff like that, and how it works. Because basically sometimes, you know, people might get a bit of money. They'll go to the bank, they'll sit down, somebody will show them a graph and show them some pretty pictures, and they'll go for it. Now, I've got people close to me who lost money with some of those financial tools simply because they didn't really understand the tools. So when things go a bit pear-shaped or the share price drops, you know, you've invested your money in a fund and it's linked to the FTSE 100. The FTSE 100 drops, you lose your money, or you lost a lot of value on your shares and stuff like that. So I talk about the process. I talk about the different types of shares that they have, what dividends are,
Excellent.
Information
I'm lost already. So.
Well, this and
it's a scary topic. Like,
well, I've tried to explain it. Yeah, I know.
I can't hear what you're saying.
I know. I'm sorry, but I've tried to explain it in a really, really simple way.
Excellent.
And then
in a way that I cannot switch off. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. And then it
is really difficult. I'm telling you, when it comes to maths, like I literally. But the minute you said the word ISA, it was like, my mind just flatlines and just thinks, oh, okay, like, what's the weather like? It's a really difficult.
It is.
But I guess it's a fear. You have to.
It is, but these are the things that that people need to know what these things are.
Yeah.
Because what will happen is, then you can make an informed decision. If you're making a decision that's not based upon knowledge and wisdom, then you're basically taking a guess. So what happens is you place the responsibility of what you're going to do in somebody else's hands.
Exactly.
Do you know? So you need the information.
So I'm going to have to struggle through that chapter. Hopefully you've made it really easy.
I've made it really easy.
So chapter 5.
The next one's about.
I'll be calling you soon. Yeah. Like, guess what? I'm in the money. But chapter 5. So
I hope that I basically. The thing is, I had somebody sent me a tweet this morning, and they were like, "Look, Saif, I've read the book, man. I'm looking to, I'm gonna buy a house. So how am I gonna do that?" And that for me, that means a lot to me, because the reality of it is, some people might say, well, you're giving the youth good delusions of grandeur or something, but for me, the youth need to be thinking bigger than tower blocks and what they see in front of them. They need to be thinking about, well, I can be successful. I can be somebody. That's one of the great things I'd say about hip hop music, is that you've got people like Russell Simmons, you've got people like the RZA, you got people who've come from poverty, like abject poverty, to become successful and help other people become successful as well. And I suppose part of this process is I want to add on to the work that has gone before. It's part of
it is beautiful, because as artists, like I said, when you realize that, your work is actually, your music or your lyrics are actually touching people, to know that you've actually helped someone go and get to a better place. It's a beautiful feeling, it's just that pause where you're like, do you know what? I am grateful to my Lord, do you know what I mean, that I'm in this position. So, yeah.
Definitely, definitely.
Chapter 5.
All right, so the next one is about investment in property and how to buy houses and stuff. And I talk about buying property in financial countries. I talk about the difference between residential and commercial property. I talk about planning permission and how that works and the process of getting planning permission. The next chapter, I talk about how to set up a business. I talk about different business structures like sole traders, partnerships, private limited companies, market research, marketing. Then the next chapter, I start talking about how you build a team, because basically what I'm trying to say is, when you're if you look at a football team, you've got your goalkeeper, you got your defenders, you got your midfield, you got your strikers. Some football teams work better than others, but basically it's the same type of structure.
It's strategy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, honestly, when it comes to maths, I think it is. Everything has a formula for success.
Exactly.
That's the way this universe has been created.
We're blessed with, we have a very logical, wise creator, and the reality of it is that the way the universe works is very, very logical.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you're here or on Pluto, 1 + 1 will always equal 2. And that's just the way I see the world. Like, things work in formulas. You can see the formulas in everything. Some people use the formulas better than others, but the reality of it is it's still a formula.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying is, you need to have good people around you who can do different things. You know, so
know your team players. So know who's going to be the goal, the one that strikes, and the one that, I don't know about football, but you know.
Yeah. You were doing well though.
Yeah, thank you. I sounded like I knew.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Like, for example, if I see something, I got people around me who their thing is law. If I see something I don't understand, I read a contract, I don't understand it. It's the same people that I've been going to for how many years that I call. Do you get what I'm saying?
Stop being lazy. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes I think when I'm trying to get through a process, I'm like, okay, I don't know how to do this. Well, let me go find someone who knows how to do it and pay them to do it, you know, and so I can get on with what I need to do. And you know, I think we have to stop being so lazy and get through what we need to. As much as I probably wouldn't want to get through chapter 4, I got to get through it to, you know, for me to want to get to where I want to get to.
I mean, for me, I've tried to write it as like, make everything as basic as possible, because I went through that process. You know, when I was 16, like I said, I just started making records. I wanted to do it properly as a proper label. And then basically, I'm walking into an office, somebody's speaking to me, and I'm like, I've literally, now I'm mind boggled the way I'm confused by the time I've actually spoken to somebody who's supposed to be a business advisor. I've tried to make this very simple, because like I said, I've been through that process. So I'm trying to make it very accessible, very simple. You know, for me, the target audience is people who live in an urban environment, and the kind of things that they face and the challenges they face. You know, there's young people from all communities, because I do a lot of work with the youth. I meet young people from every community, every ethnic background that you can speak of. And the reality of it is, a lot of them are going, in fact, they're all going through the same challenges. Unemployment, can't find work, don't know what to do. They've
got visions, they've got dreams, and some of them are amazing.
Definitely.
You know, and I just think if we broaden their aspirations and, you know, give them something to reach for, and just be like, look, you can access this.
Definitely.
All you gotta do is A, B, C, D, and let's do that.
Definitely. Well, whether right or wrong, you know, it's, for me, my passion, as far as I'm concerned, young people are the most precious resource that we have on this planet. They are the most precious resource. You know, they are our future. They are our chance for, you know, for the redemption of the world. You know, that's just my opinion. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what drives me to do what I do with young people.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and we do need to remember that. I think that's a good point. You know, young people are the future. They are the next generation, aren't they? And if we don't invest in them, which is why I say about raising children, if we don't know your children, then, you know, you're going to have problems. You're going to not recognise your 16-year-old that kisses their teeth at you. It's like, what are you talking about, Mum? I'm going where I want to go. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? You know, because you didn't see it coming. So we have to know our children and know what's around them. So what chapter are we on? I don't want to...
And then after that chapter around...
we're near the end now, are we?
After that chapter about building teams, there's one about protecting your investment.
Excellent.
And then there's a glossary, and and then basically you got the plans. You know, so I have like a chapter which talks about plans and stages and how to take things to the next level. And you know, I talk about it. Chapter 8. It's called Planning Your Future. And I like in that plan, in that chapter, I talk about stage 1, stage 2. You know, how to go forward, how to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And from having nothing, and the different stages you would go through every time that you improve your situation. Because the thing is, when you're around some of these business people, they make 5-year plans, they make 10-year plans, they make 15-year plans. They're like, well, we're going to do this in the summer of 2014.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They do that.
They're well ahead.
They speak in that language and they think in that way.
Yeah.
It's like snooker. When you're playing snooker, they're thinking about what they're going to be doing 3 or 4 moves ahead of the move they're about to make.
I was in a maths class the other day because I work in secondary schools, and talking about maths and how we love it and stuff. The teacher was talking about a race that Hamilton done, and what his team had done is they'd calculated what the weather was going to be by the last lap, and they had calculated that it was going to rain on the last lap. So I think I can't even remember the year because I wanted to look up the race. But so be it. When he got into the pit stop, they changed his wheels so that they were ready for the wet surface. And the last lap came, and what happened? It started raining. And he won the race. He overtook the guy that was in front on the last lap. They calculated, that success. And, it's just, I think it goes hand in hand in what we're saying,
Definitely. It's chess. It's, life is chess, It's
you have to plan ahead.
It's multiple things that you need to consider.
In terms of chess, you need to know who your enemies are. You need to know who's out to, try and take over you.
That's the reality.
Wipe you off that board.
That's the reality, and just stay focused. Know yourself. Know who you are. Know what you're trying to do. Having a clean heart and a righteous objective helps, because the reality of it is, when you got that with you, you get that backing. Do you know what I mean? You get that backing. So I suppose for me, I just hope that a lot of people who come from similar conditions to myself will read the book and gain something from it, and it'll give them the self-confidence to say, well, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. I might not agree with Cypher 100%, but this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm on it now. I just want to give that spur, and for people to do things, and I'm going to start doing some workshops.
Okay, I was going to say, is there any spin-offs off the book
definitely.
now
That's the plan.
Result?
That's the plan. I want to start doing some workshops, and during those workshops.
How long is your plan then, hey? 5 years, 10 years? Give it up.
Shall I tell you the truth?
Okay.
As much as I encourage people, I do think strategically, but I have a long-term plan. I have long-term objectives, but I recognize that life is very valuable. I've been through enough experiences, and I've been through some things where I know that also certain things happen which are out of your control. But for me, I've got long-term objectives of where I'd like to be, of what I'd like to happen. But I recognize that you got to live in the now, in terms of, give thanks for life. Every day is another day. You want you know what you want to happen in the future, but that that's all due to you having good health and having life. So as long as I've got that, I'm gonna try and keep going forward and doing something positive. And
it's funny that we don't. I think when you do meet all of these entrepreneurs and whatever, we do have to pause and remember your physiology is very important. You have to look after yourself. You have to go to the gym, you have to drink regularly, etc. We have to do these things in order to be successful, because if you haven't got that energy, you ain't going to be able to move forward, with yourself.
Definitely. So, that's one of the 20 principles. You got to have good health.
Yeah.
You gotta have good health, but the thing is, like, you gotta know what you're doing it for. For me, I've got a cause. My cause is the development of communities. Because for me, youth development and community development is just not sustainable without economic development.
Yeah.
So if if all these if people can create a way of becoming self-sufficient, then they can employ other people, and it improves. It's the way of the community improving itself. Because you have to realize now, in the time of austerity, local national government might not have the will or the resources to improve our communities.
What does austerity mean? Like, I'm thinking, what does austerity mean?
Well, that austerity is.
What do you mean by austerity? Like,
I suppose austerity is that's the government. That's the local government and the national government's condition right now is basically
they've totally swooped the whole youth centre thing.
Yeah, because realistically, the country's in debt.
Yeah.
And unless they're going to borrow more money, the resources aren't really there, or the will to use resources aren't there to basically run the youth projects, run the community projects. So to a certain degree, not completely, but to a certain degree, if community people want to continue these programs, then it's going to take people sharing the load and maybe saying, well, we'll take some finances, we'll raise some finances ourselves and develop programs to run these community programs that we need. I mean, people are doing it already. There's people who've bought buildings and set up community centres, because a lot of community centres are closing, and using private financing to do it.
And that's what we're in the position to empower young people to do, isn't it? Get them to achieve their visions and their dreams, and be in a position where they can employ a generation.
Definitely.
Definitely. So these workshops that you're doing, we're coming up to the end of the show. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Well, I mean, I'm planning to go up and down the country and do these workshops, meet, and just kind of spread the message, really. That's I suppose, as long as things go the way I would like to, I'm going to do a lot of that in 2013, all being well, and like I said, I hope it has an effect. Even if it's just for people to look at what they're spending their money on. I watch YouTube videos. You had your launch when? The other day? Yeah.
And look, what I said about that fear. You've done phenomenally well. Honestly, Cypher, I'm really proud of you to know that I've known that you haven't given up. You've kept fighting. I've seen you as a young person, like reaching for the stars, going for it. Morris Delta became a name that was well known. You heard it on the radio, and it takes a lot of confidence, because I think there are a lot of people, unfortunately, that almost don't want to see you be successful, and sometimes those are people that we love. And you have to take time, like I said, when it comes to a chessboard, you have to take time to recognize who's around you and who genuinely is like, you know what, I'm so happy for you, can I do this for you to make a way for you, or am I going to put this in front of you to stop you from getting to where you need to get to?
That's another one of those things I talk about.
Okay,
you got to make sure that you have positive people around you, and not negative people around you. Because the reality of it is, if you've got 4 people together in a room, and they say, well, let's do this, let's do something positive, let's do this, let's do that, right? The energy between the 4 people, right, that energy is enough to push a project forward, because everything needs fuel. So once you've got the knowledge and the wisdom in terms of this is how we're going to do it, you develop a strategy. The fuel will be that positive energy. But you see, if you put, say, two want to do it and 2 are like, no, it can't be done, and why are you doing this, and then basically it's never going to take off. So
So, any plans for another book? Have you got anything in the pipelines?
Well, you know,
are you hungry for more?
We'll see how this one. I mean, it's funny. I actually started writing another book before, and then before I started writing this one. So I've got something sitting down there.
Okay.
But it's in the beginning stages before
it's an exclusive.
Yeah.
We have an exclusive. Potentially there's a part 2, yeah. I want to thank you so much, for coming onto the show and sharing, the success of the book.
Thank you.
As I said, really looking forward to it and reading through it. I'm so going to get through chapter 4. I'm going to be like, in fact, I'll be like, Cypher, I managed to get through chapter 4. Okay, and I understand. Come test me. Ask me what an ISA is.
A private equity company is.
Oh, gosh. So, yeah.
It's real simple. The thing is, it's real simple. And, definitely. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And like to all the listeners, I hope that I hope I've explained it for you, and I hope some young people remember, this book's not just for young people, but the hip hop generation. People could be 14 to 60.
Yeah.
I hope that you gain something from the information and go forward positively. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'll put details of how you can contact Cypher on Facebook. I think you've got a Facebook page, haven't you? Is it?
Yeah, my Facebook is King Cypher Jules and my Twitter is Cypher Jules.
Okay.
But yeah, get in contact with
Shalina.
Yeah, Shalina
Lit.
Yeah,
AKA Tahir. See, I'm still cool, AKA. So, okay, Jazakallah khairan to all my listeners. I hope you've enjoyed the show. As I said, the purpose of today's show was really to reignite that desire for you as a parent to really place the things that your children need or your young people need around them to reach, for better things. Otherwise, they're only going to reach for what's in front of them. And, you want it to be things that, are going to progress them and not things that are going to see them in jail, etc. So anyway, look forward to seeing you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.